Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive today.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is.
Yeah.
We are going virtually to Finland
Yeah.
to look at a blog post that really got us thinking.
I love these international deep dives.
Me too. And this one
Yeah.
is called Pulpitan Mars,
Wow.
which means, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that.
Right? But it means march to the desk.
Okay.
And it's by this blogger named Juka.
Mm.
And he's diving into some really thought-provoking ideas about education systems.
You know, we often just accept the way things are.
Right.
Especially with something like education, you know?
It's just
How it is.
Yeah, it's always been this way.
Right.
But Juka's pushing us to question those assumptions.
Yeah, and he starts right off the bat comparing modern education to the 18th century Prussian model.
Oh, yeah.
Which was designed to, just churn out obedient factory workers.
Rats in the machine.
Yeah, for the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, like an assembly line.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It is. It makes you wonder if we're still being molded to fit into some predetermined role in society, you know?
It's a great point, and to drive that home, Juka contrasts that with Plato's Academy,
Right.
which was all about creating well-rounded citizens who could think for themselves and participate in a democracy.
It's like two totally different paths.
Yeah.
Education for conformity versus education for empowerment.
It's a battle that's been going on for centuries.
Oh, for sure. And he even takes us back to ancient Rome.
Oh, wow.
Where the elite adopted this idea of well-rounded education,
Okay.
but only for themselves.
Oh, so they knew the power of it.
Oh, absolutely.
But
They kept it from the masses.
Wow. So they used education to maintain the social hierarchy.
Exactly.
And that kind of brings us to the Church of the Middle Ages,
Yeah.
which kind of solidified this further by controlling access to knowledge.
Right. And they limited it for common people.
So
Yeah.
education as a privilege, not a right.
Exactly.
So even with all the progress we've made towards universal education, are we still living with this legacy of that dual system?
It's a good question, and Juka takes it even further.
Oh, really?
He questions whether widespread education is actually good for everyone.
Okay, so is he saying we don't need everyone to be deeply educated?
Well, he argues that teaching basic skills, just the basics,
Right.
might be enough for order and stability.
So he thinks excessive knowledge could lead to...
Well, people might start questioning the system.
Oh, I see.
And that could disrupt things, you know?
Disrupt the harmony.
Exactly. It's like that old fear of knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Like Pandora's box.
Exactly. Once it's open, you can't close it.
So is he suggesting a trade-off between stability and critical thinking?
It really makes you think about what we're trying to achieve with education, doesn't it?
It does, and this is where Juka gets even more interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
He thinks there might be two separate systems at play.
Okay.
Like, the masses are taught just enough to function,
Uh-huh.
but the upper class,
Yeah.
they get a different kind of education.
Yeah. Oh, so like one to understand.
Power dynamics.
Yeah. The world's power dynamics.
So elite education is about more than just knowledge.
Way more.
It's about maintaining those power structures.
Absolutely. It's about understanding how to keep things the way they are.
So even highly educated people, like,
bureaucrats.
yeah, policymakers,
All of them
they could be products of a system.
designed to maintain the status quo.
Wow, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is, but it leads to his next point, which is the power of conformity.
Okay.
He says that generations of this kind of indoctrination create a society
Okay.
where everyone understands the rules.
Don't rock the boat.
Exactly. You play by the rules, you succeed.
But if you challenge the system,
Well,
what happens?
you face the consequences.
So it's like this unspoken agreement,
Yeah, everyone knows their place.
and they know how to play the game
And even those who challenge the system, they don't really have much impact.
because everyone knows the risks.
Right. It's like this deeply ingrained obedience to authority.
That's a bit depressing.
It is a bit, isn't it?
To think that the very institutions designed to educate us
Yeah.
might also be perpetuating the problem.
It's a sobering thought, for sure.
It really is.
Yeah. Makes you wonder about the implications, right?
I mean, it's a powerful argument,
It is.
but we do have to keep in mind that Jiraga's writing from a very specific context.
True.
You know, Finland,
Yeah.
it's a different world.
Very different.
They have a strong social safety net
Uh-huh.
and a big focus on equality.
Yeah, so that probably shapes his view
I think so, yeah.
on the potential downsides
Of everyone.
of a highly educated population.
Okay, so let's explore that a bit.
Okay.
What are those potential downsides?
Well, one thing he kind of hints at is social unrest.
Oh,
If everyone's questioning everything,
Yeah.
it could lead to instability.
I see, like people challenging the powers that be.
Exactly, and demanding change.
So it's that classic dilemma.
Yeah.
Stability versus progress.
Right. How do you balance those two things?
How do you balance the need for order with the desire for progress?
It's a tough one.
It really is. And Juka doesn't offer any easy answers.
No, he doesn't, but he does make us think
He does.
about the trade-offs, you know?
Yeah, like imagine a classroom
Okay.
where every student is constantly questioning the teacher.
Oh, it would be chaos.
Total chaos.
Yeah, but then again,
What a...
imagine a classroom where no one questions anything.
Oh, God. Yeah.
That's not good either.
That sounds like blind obedience.
Right, so how do we find that sweet spot?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Exactly. How do we encourage critical thinking
Yeah.
without descending into anarchy?
It makes me think of that saying,
What's that?
a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is he suggesting that sometimes ignorance can be a form of control?
It's a provocative thought, isn't it?
It is.
And it's not a new one either.
Right.
Throughout history, those in power have always feared.
Masses knowing too much.
Yeah, because then they start questioning things.
So is he saying we should go back to the days when education was only for the elite?
I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's challenging us to really think about the purpose of education.
So is it just to prepare us for the workforce?
Right. To be productive members of society.
Or is it something more?
Yeah, to empower us to think critically and challenge the status quo.
That's a really important distinction.
It is.
And I think it's something a lot of educators are grappling with today.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you teach practical skills and foster critical thinking at the same time?
It's tough.
It is not easy.
And Juka's point is that we have to be aware of this tension
between those two goals.
Yeah, education can be a tool for either maintaining or challenging the existing power structure.
It can be used for good or for...
Or not so good.
Yeah.
And it's up to us to decide which path we want to take.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about these big abstract ideas.
We have.
About power and education.
Yeah.
So let's bring it down to earth a bit.
Okay, good idea.
Let's shift our focus from Finland to the U.S.
Okay.
And look at how these ideas are playing out in a very real way.
Sounds good.
I'm thinking specifically about
the
controversy over critical race theory.
Oh, CRT.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect example.
It's a battleground.
Absolutely a battleground over the purpose of education.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar with CRT, could you give us a quick overview?
Sure. CRT is basically a way of looking at how racism is woven into the fabric of society.
Okay.
Not just through individual prejudice, but through laws, policies, institutions.
So it's systemic.
Exactly. It argues that racism is systemic and can perpetuate inequality even if it's not intentional.
So kind of like what Juka was saying.
Yeah, exactly.
About how education systems can maintain the status quo even unintentionally.
Right. And that's why it's become such a flashpoint.
Because,
well, critics worry it's divisive.
Okay.
They say it teaches kids to view everything through the lens of race.
Makes white children feel guilty.
That's excellent.
And then on the other side,
yeah,
you have proponents who argue that it's essential.
Absolutely. It's vital for understanding the history of racism.
Yeah.
And its ongoing effects on society.
So for them, it's about
addressing systemic inequalities and building a more just future.
So you have these two very different perspectives.
Two sides of the same coin.
On what the purpose of education should be.
To uphold existing power structures or to challenge them.
And that's the heart of the debate over CRT.
It really is.
It's about, like, whose story gets told, right?
It is.
And what kind of future we want.
Exactly. Are we trying to keep things the same or shake things up?
To make a more just world.
Right. And this is where Yuka's ideas are so relevant. He's saying that education can be a tool for either keeping things the same or changing them.
And the CRT debate is like a perfect example of that.
It really is.
For those who want to keep the power structures in place, CRT is like a threat.
Because it challenges that whole idea of a colorblind society.
Where everyone has an equal chance.
Yeah, it forces us to face some hard truth.
About how the past is still affecting us today.
Absolutely. And it challenges that idea that all you need is hard work.
And you can overcome anything.
Yeah, but for those who are fighting for change, CRT is essential.
To understand.
To understand how these systems of oppression work.
And to dismantle them.
Exactly.
So it seems like the fight over CRT isn't really about the curriculum itself.
No.
It's about power.
It is.
Who decides what gets taught?
Exactly.
What stories get told?
And ultimately, what kind of society we're creating.
So it's a reminder that education is never neutral.
Never.
It's always wrapped up in these power dynamics.
Always.
It shapes how we see the world.
Right.
How we see ourselves.
And what we believe is possible.
Okay, so what can we do?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's easy to feel overwhelmed
Oh, absolutely.
by these big systemic issues.
Right, but I think the first step is awareness.
Awareness
of those power dynamics.
the things that shape what we learn.
Yeah, and how we learn it.
Being critical of the information we're given.
Absolutely, and understanding the context.
And recognizing who benefits from certain narratives.
Right, and then we have to engage in those tough conversations.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Especially when it's uncomfortable.
To be willing to listen to different perspectives.
Even when we don't agree.
And try to understand where they're coming from.
Because the goal of education should be to empower us.
Give us the tools we need.
Exactly, the tools to think for ourselves.
To question things.
And to work towards a better world.
Well, Jukka's blog post really got us thinking.
It did.
About the real purpose of education.
Yeah.
And the things that influence it.
It's a complex issue.
It is. Thanks for diving into this with me.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it's given you some new insights and inspired you to think differently about the role of education in your own life and in the world around you.
Definitely keep those conversations going.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.